Welcome to Live with Lindsy.
Okay, so this is the last episode with hubby. And babe, I just want to thank you, first off, for being willing to do this for the past 4 weeks, because honestly, it does. It takes a lot of time and energy and just being willing to get comfortable to chat about our life. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. And thank you for letting me partake, because as far as, if anyone knows me, that I'm not very, I wouldn't say, not too vocal, but I'm not vocal about our lives, our homes and our privacy, if you want to call it that. But no, it's been an experience and it's been fun, and I'm glad that you were able to walk me through it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's funny because we'll tap into this because we're doing a Q&A today, just because it's been so fun the past 3 weeks. You guys have had a lot of questions, which have been awesome. I wish we could get to all of them, but we picked out 3 to 4 that we're going to answer today. So the first one, babe, was, it said, how do you deal with in-law drama after you have children? And when I read this, I chuckled because I think this is such a common conversation that so many marriages, if you have a pulse and you have in-laws, it's probably something you've had to talk about. I personally think respect is a huge core, trait that you need to have embedded in your family, because without that, things can get nasty, right? You cannot control other people, you can't control how they react, but what you can control is how you navigate through your family's, boundaries. And I know for Chris and I feel really blessed because we both, I love your family, I know you love my family, but again, we didn't all grow up the same, which means it's going to be different, right?
Yeah, I think anyone who's married has, you obviously most likely you're going to have in-laws, and hopefully it's great. Hopefully you and your in-laws get along just fine. From a man's standpoint, hopefully you and your father-in-law like to do the same stuff, whether it's, fishing, hunting, golfing, whatever it may be. And then sometimes it's the other way where it's you're begrudgingly visiting your in-laws, which, is unfortunate, but either way, you're going to have to, I hate to say the word deal with them, but it sounds so in such a negative connotation. But no, essentially, you're going to have to interact and be family. And so, yeah, it's one of those things you got to do.
Well, we were talking about it, and I think we're coming from a biblical standpoint, because I really feel without Christ at the center of marriages, everything will go awry. I believe that in my core. We are two flawed human beings, and you come from different families. It's really hard. But when you put Christ at the center, you're able to say, okay, God, how do we create our family and what, the boundaries we need while still respecting our extended family? And we were talking how when you get married, you leave and cleave from your family, and you have now created, Chris and I are one, and we have our children. We are in charge of our family. Whatever our extended family says, by all means, they're welcome. Everyone has their own opinion. But at the end of the day, it's between Chris and I. And we need to be on the same page. And I think that's something for me that I've been so grateful. I've had a husband who, I feel like you always want to know, Lindsay, how do you feel about this? How can I help, with making sure that your idea is being heard with my family, and vice versa. And I always want to make sure, hey, is anything bothering you with my family? And again, we have awesome families, but we're all human. And I just appreciate the fact that he listens. And I think we both, we want to go to bat and protect one another.
No, definitely. We talked about it earlier about just discussing this was, I just made it plain and simple. I married you, I didn't marry your mom or dad. So I understand biblically it's leave and cleave, and I truly believe that, but it's I feel there's so many couples that are just they want to please their spouse, but they also want to still be pleasing to their parents, which I get. And that's a tough situation. It's obviously your parents, they raised you, they took care of you when you were young, and they watched you grow, they mentored you and all that wonderful all those wonderful things. But when you decided to get married, that's where you cut the umbilical cord, definitely there. So I know there's been times in our marriage where it's I've had to go to bat for you, and it's I'm more than willing to do so. But obviously I'm not saying, in my instance, my wife and my mother or father have a disagreement, I'm not going to go rampaging at my parents. And no, but it's you meet them with grace and you realize, hey, like, you know what, this is my wife. This is how we feel about things as a family. It's not, oh yeah, she feels this way and you don't.
Yes.
No, it's we do. We feel this way. This is the way we want things to go. And like, you may not see it that way. Hopefully I can give you an idea of how we see it. So maybe we can come to an agreement or come to some type of compromise.
Right.
But in the end, it's like, I didn't marry my in-laws and she didn't marry, my mother and father. She married me and I married her, and I didn't choose my parents. You never get to choose who your parents are. And the fact that I chose her, that's definitely like, to me, that's a bigger symbol, bigger meaning that like I elected to be married to this woman, to take her as my one and only for forever. And forever. And it's like, yeah, they're going to be my parents forever, but at the same time, like, I didn't choose them, and I don't mean to sound harsh by saying that. It's just, biblically it just makes sense as far as like, like, guess what? You're like, once again, we've talked about like, put your big boy pants on and be a husband and a father. And that's your new role. It's not being a son anymore. You're done with that. That's over.
Right. I mean, you're still son, but
you're
it's
still
like
a son, but like, I'm like,
your priority.
Mom, I want the bagel bites and the meatloaf. Like that's that's not happening anymore. So, like.
Yeah. No, I love that. We've chatted about this because it's not like we're so seasoned, but we've been through some things. And I think it's always like treating it with what Chris said, like with grace and also kindness, with your in-laws and with your personal family. But at the end of the day, just like Chris said, it's so important that we're intentional about how we treat each other. So this is something, and it's like one of our number one rules of put yourself in my position. So when there's been like some type of like, well, there may be something that my parents do and I'm like, that shouldn't bother you. And maybe he's like, well, this bothers me. And I'm like, why would it bother you? Because sometimes it could be cultural. There's so many different like facets that could influence why you think the way you think. So even though I'm like, well, I don't see it as a big deal, but he's like, hey, put yourself in my position. If you were me and you came home and whatever the situation is, it allows me, even though I'm like, well, I know I'm not Chris and I know I think different, but now I can really understand that would hurt me. Like that would hurt me if I was in his position, right? And so I feel like that's something we always do. Like, please just put yourself in my shoes. And I think in that, then it's like, hey, I want to go to bat, or I want to stand up for my husband or wife. And at the end of the day too, your kids are your kids. And if people aren't going to respect like what Chris said, the boundaries you've made for your children, then you do have to make boundaries with family. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. Sometimes it sucks, but sometimes that may need to happen. And we pray it doesn't. Like, we love spending time with our families, but I know there's some families that are like, right now I have to be separate from my parents right now because they're going through a really tough time and all their stuff is, kind of toxifying things when they come over, and we just don't want that in our nuclear unit. And it's like, that's okay. You may need that boundary, but I always say, like, go to God, because he's the one who's going to tell you if you need those boundaries and then how really to like interact with your in-laws or, with your spouse.
No, I agree. And I think just to put a button on it and answer that question is, yeah, make those boundaries and really identify what it means to be married. It means that you leave your family to create a family, and that's the family that should matter. That's the family that should come first. So regardless of what the in-laws or your parents say coming from here or there, it's it's all noise and compared to everything else.
Yep.
So yeah, make those boundaries.
Yes. And we know it's like the three accord, like you have God and then husband, wife, and that bond should not be broken, right? And it's also like, well, the in-laws wrap around, and no, it's you three, and that's the most important thing. So we'll go into our next question, which I think it's a great question. I feel like we get this all the time because we have 3 girls and they're at the ages that they're at, and they're just like, how do you guys make time for sexy time? Or like being intimate, and intimate isn't always sex. Let's get real. Sometimes it's just talking. But how do you guys have your you time?
Yeah, regardless, you still got to make time, because
you got to make time.
Whether it's the physical aspect of it or just the, I don't know if you want to call it the intellectual aspect of just having a grown conversation, like, you still have those little knocks at the door, those little cries and yells and screams, and yeah, it's tough.
And one thing we learned this in counseling, and I feel like it's like, well, duh, but Chris is not a mind reader, and I don't read his mind. I think sometimes we assume our partner should know, and it's like, if it means this much to you, you need to share with them. Like, hey, it is really important that we don't just like have sex and then you just roll over and we don't talk for the rest of the night. Maybe you're like, I'd love to cuddle, or it means a lot if we talk. Like communicating your needs, I think is so important. Or if you're like, hey, you turn on, like it's really easy for you to just like, let's go have like sexy time. We had one of our counselors say like, Lindsy and Chris, you guys are going to be different. Like Lindsy tells you that she has this important call at 10 a.m. and you call her after, 11 and go, hey babe, how was that call? Tell me what happened. Oh my God. I'm like, oh, what? He called? He wants to know? Like I'm literally getting turned on because emotionally he's investing. And then he calls me again at 2:00 and he's like, hey babe, I'm going to be home a little bit earlier, as if he had like a 9 to 5. And I'm going to pick up a few things from the store. Do you need anything? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, we need some milk. He comes home with milk, and then he also brings me like a sweet little rose. And I'm like, oh my God. Again, I'm getting turned on. He's like romancing me. These are just little things that are making me happy. And then by the time it's dinner, I'm like made dinner and I'm about to put the kids like in the bath and I'm gonna do dishes. And Chris is like, hold on, babe. Let me do the dishes, go bathe the kids, and then just go take a shower and just get in your PJs. Oh, baby boo, I'm not going to be in PJs when he gets into bed because I'm going to be so turned on from all the things through the day that he's paying attention to love on me, right? So sometimes men, they're like, well, I expect her to just be waiting and ready for me. And it's like, well, how have you met her in those instances, right? Like, how are you serving her? And vice versa, ladies. If you are like, so regimen, and you were like, I was at PTA meeting, and then I went to Bible study, and then after Bible study I went to spin class, and then I went to pick up the kids, and then I made dinner, and then I took the kids to dance, and I had soccer, and then I came home and I'm like so exhausted, and then your husband comes home and you have nothing for him, and you're just like, ugh. That's not good either. Like you need to carve out time to be connecting with your spouse, and if you're too burnt out at the end of the night to have sex with your husband, there's a problem there. So I think it's like there also is this accountability on yourself that like you need to create that space, and it's not just like at nighttime or at noon or whenever. It's like you emotionally and mentally need to create like that space to be like, I need to go there. I want to connect with my husband or wife.
Yeah.
That was from one of our counseling sessions.
No, I get it. And so essentially if you want sexy time, you got to be the slave. Just get the milk. Do the dishes, and
no.
I know I'm kidding. I like.
You plan dates, and that was like a big
Well, that's
thing.
the thing. I think for from a man's perspective, I totally get it. It's like whether your wife works or she stays home. Staying home with children is a crazy job.
Yes.
Like there's been times where it's like, as much as I love it, like she'll go on trips and I'll be left with the 3 kids, and it's work. It's fun. It's enjoyable, but it's just like it's nonstop. So for those women who do that every day, like I give it to you, yes, for sure. But the thing is, it's like you can't just expect your wife to handle every single thing. And I think for men, and I think it's kind of like a lost art, is men need to be more intentional as far as, hey, like if you want your wife to look at you in that manner and to be intimate with you, you need to like put forth the effort. Because I think nowadays with men, it's just kind of like, I'm gonna sit back and let my wife do everything. She can bathe and feed the kids and do the dishes, cook dinner, all that stuff, and then she better be ready for me when I get home. Like, no, you're gonna be intentional. Like plan a date, find that childcare, whether it's like your in-laws or your mother and father. If you have a babysitter that you use, like plan it so that she realizes like you got skin in the game here. You got you did your work. You did you put forth the effort. And I just think like that's even just like the smallest part you can do. It doesn't take much to, call me old school. It doesn't take much to call a restaurant or something and make reservations. I know everything's on, heaven forbid you talk to a human. But yeah, it's like, it doesn't take much to make reservations, to find childcare, to plan a date for your wife so that she can just not have anything to worry about since she's worrying all day as it is, and then on the other aspect of it, like just listen. If stuff means a lot to your spouse, I think this can go man or woman. If stuff means a lot to your spouse, listen. Listen, be intent, and be encouraging. And it's like I've learned in my short time being married that goes a long way. It took a lot for me to figure out sometimes, and I've made some really dumb moves and some really I was that guy that would race home like, oh yeah, I'm ready, and she's over here like covered in like in our earlier years, covered in like baby puke and like looking like she likes to say a troll, and I'm just like, wait, I told you I was on my way home, like. So yeah, I think it's just definitely like to, after kids being intimate, you need to be intentional on both parts, whether it's, setting aside time or, like you said, like conserving that energy as you might want to put it, to, being intentional and making it happen and not just leaving it for the other person to
plan and make it happen. And I think too, it's like there's some families that'll be like, well, we don't have childcare, we don't have in-laws. And I'm like, I get that, but there are so many ways, like whether if you feel comfortable enough, like there is, like you can, is there a babysitter who can come over? Can you find someone, like ask someone at church, like be intentional about that. Like, God, can you lead me to someone? I genuinely believe God will guide you to someone to at least watch your kids for 2 hours, But let's say you still can't. Then it's like, when the kids go to bed, what if you, like bedtime is now 7:30 and then you guys create a date night at your house. Maybe you guys have a candlelit dinner while the kids are asleep and you guys, I don't know, play Uno. We like Uno, we're so cheesy, but like, you can even have date nights in. And something that Chris said that I think for women, is like when you listen, right? Like it was my birthday last year and like every year, but like last year, Chris, I was going through a tough time and he got me my gift and I saw it and it was concert tickets to my favorite artist, like love her. And I'm like, wow, that was so awesome. And then I look and he's like, oh, do you see where it's at? And I'm like, it's in Nashville? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And the intention behind that, it was like, no, he didn't just get for the night to go to a concert, which I would have been so happy because we've gone a few times to see her. But it was like, no, we're going on a trip. And it was Valentine's Day weekend. It was like, we are going to go to Tennessee and we're going to go do the Nashville thing, just us. And to me, it spoke volume of like, wow, you really are listening to me. The fact that like, I love this artist and the fact that we've both never been to this city. And at this point, I feel like we needed that just time to be us. Like that, it meant the world. And so I think even there, like whether it's surprising your spouse and just listening to the things that they want and then just planning it. So kudos to you, babe. Oh, so our third question was one of my favorites. How do you deal with being different from your spouse? And I feel like, we couldn't be more different.
Right. If you knew either of us, we couldn't be more different. She's our vibrant Miss Congeniality, blabbing away, where I'm more the, like, I don't know you, I don't really want to talk to you. Like, maybe sometime, but not right now. So, yeah, we are polar opposites.
Yes.
For the most part. Like, when it comes to the important things, like our faith, our children, like, big stuff like that, we're very much on board. I don't think you can be married if someone's polar opposite in that aspect, or at least it would be very, tough. Mm-hmm. But in just our personality quirks, like, yeah, we're very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say the least.
And biblically, it really does say don't be unequally yoked, which to me is like the faith, like you both, when you are married to a believer, like that you're a believer, you need to find a believer, right? And if you've married someone who's not a believer, it makes it that much harder because they're not equally yoked. Does that mean you're doomed? No, it doesn't. What I always tell women or men, it's like, you just pray for a double portion of grace and help. And that because when you, like Chris, we connect emotionally, we connect physically, but Chris and I also connect spiritually. Like praying with Chris is like, to me, like such a blessing. Like I love that I can talk to him about the word and we can go to church together. Like it is isolating when you're the only one taking your children to church. It is hard. But that to be said, like ask God for that double portion of help and grace and strength, and be praying for your spouse, because the power of prayer, my God, the Lord can bring your spouse to him, and it's in the right timing, and you just have to pray. But I think the one thing is like you can't try to change your spouse. Like I don't need to make Chris be Lindsay, and Chris doesn't need to make Lindsay be me. Like you need to embrace like who that person is. And I think that's taken time for both of us, because it's easy when you're set in your ways and you know how things are. And well, why don't, I love going out, and I love being around people. And Chris actually, like when you get to know Chris, he talks a lot and he's so fun. But at first, he's more of like the reserve, like he's checking things out, which I love, but I'm like, let's go. And there's sometimes where he's like, can we just be at home? And he's taught me, like I've learned the beauty, and like, now I'm like, gosh, I love being home. I love just being in our family. And like, sometimes I'm like, I don't even want to go out. So I think when you start to learn and appreciate the differences, opposed to trying to pin them on like, well, you do this and I don't do this. And that's where you start getting in a spiral where I feel like it's dangerous.
I think it's more, I think one of the cool things I've noticed is that being so different, like you said, you can't change your spouse. They're different and they're made different for a reason. And for a while, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, oh, God, I wish Lindsay liked doing this instead of doing that. And it'd be so much more easier if we had the same ideas and stuff. But I look at it as like look at it as a positive. Like, she teaches me so much. Like, take it as a teaching moment. Like, she teaches me so much by the way she thinks, and it's so different. And, like, the ideas that she has are things I would never even think of. And it's beneficial in the fact that, like, it gives me a different point of view. If that, to put it as simply as I can. And I like to think I do the same thing for her. Like, she'll ask me, like, oh, why did you do that? And I'm like, well, did you not notice this was happening and this was happening? And then I looked over there and I saw this was all happening. So that's why I made this move. And she's like, oh,
I was just catching butterflies.
Yeah. Like, and I mean, and it's fine. We are, like I said, we're polar opposites. She, like I said, she's Miss Congeniality. She has a million gazillion friends, like, in real life, not like social media friends that, like, that aren't really your friends, but, like, she has, like, that many friends, like, people that she knows. I'm just like, that sounds exhausting to me. And I'm like, I probably got like 5 friends that are in my little circle, but the thing is, it's like, I always say, it's extremely tough to get in that circle, but once you're in it, you're in it. And I feel like maybe that's more of a male kind of thing, but at the same time, like, my best friend in the whole world, he's her.
Yes, we're like the same. It's so funny. I'm like, you're so attracted to people like us, babe.
Yeah, he has a million gazillion friends. I'm like, oh, I can't do it. Like, it's like, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's wonderful. It's just, yeah, I guess I don't think my brain has the capacity to, like, know that many names and keep track of that many. It's a lot. Yeah. So, yeah, I think
wired different.
Yeah, and I think the thing is just, you don't look at it as a negative. The fact that you guys are so different, and you obviously, your spouse is who you chose to love for the rest of your life. So embrace that difference. You'll definitely be able to learn from it, and I don't know, I guess, yeah, you'll be able to learn from it, and hopefully you'll be able to teach.
Yeah.
You'll be able to teach the way you think and what your ideas are.
No, and I think if you're able to humble yourself enough, because a lot of times it's like you just want to be like, it's my way. But if you can humble yourself, like, I can learn, and God created me, this is a covenant and a union, and we were ordained to be together. We've built a family, like, Lord help. And always, you want to think about the other person. Like, you're at a sermon, you're like, oh, I wish my husband was here. Most of the time it's like, actually, this is for you, right? Like, allow it always to be like, you know what? Like, God, how can you massage my heart to be a better wife for Chris? And then how can you massage his heart to be a better husband for me? But, like, if there is something in your life or your marriage that you're like, this is rough, like, maybe there's an addiction in some way, or maybe there's been lying, get on your knees and start praying and asking God, intervene. Like, please guide us in this way. Go get help. Like, having counselors, mentors, like, that stuff is so helpful. That's helped us go through some tough times. And it's okay, because sometimes when you have those differences, if you're not able to both meet in the middle, or even, like, that's what I say, it's never 50-50. It's 100%, 100%. You both put 100% all the time. You just do. You choose each other. Because the minute you waver out, or you think, oh, they're giving 70 and I'm just going to give 25. It's like, no, you give 100 because God has called you to live in excellence, and that's your partner. That's your partner for life. And so, I don't know. I think it's an honor and a blessing to be married, but I think in this world it's become, we've talked about, it's like disposal, like, oh, you just get another one. But I think when you have the sacredness of it and you treat it with that, and you're willing to learn, like, God will, like, you will be a better human from marriage just because you learn so much if you allow yourself. So, the last question, babe, which I feel like we've answered through the podcast, but just from us talking, people were just like, are you guys going to move out of state? So what would you say to that? We bought it 2 acres. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, sometimes it definitely, sounds attractive. But I mean, I'm a California boy, born and raised. I'm not saying I'm live or die California, but I guess it's just I don't know any better. I really don't. I mean, she's definitely traveled a lot more than I have, seen a lot more, different places. I mean, yeah. I mean, I've never really been.
We're slowly seeing different
parts.
parts.
Yeah, we're slowly seeing different parts.
Which is good.
I mean, I'm 36 now, and I think within the past 6 years, I probably traveled the most I have. But, like, growing up as a kid, it's like, we just pretty much stayed in California, and every now and then we'd go to Arizona or like somewhere, a neighboring state. So I don't really know anything else.
Yeah.
So I can't really say, like, oh yeah, I'm going out of state and I'm going to live in, middle of nowhere. And it's like, yeah, it sounds great, and the postcard probably looks really cool, but until I really figure it out, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not against it either.
Yeah, we're not against it. We're definitely not in a place right now.
There's definitely perks, whether it's like if you're like thinking like the financial side, like
right.
California's expensive to live in for a lot of unknown reasons. You know, I don't know why.
But I love that we're like an hour from the beach. We're an hour from the mountains. We've been spoiled with that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I do love that. I love that. I've always tell them I have to be by water. I'm a beach girl. That's my heart. So I'm like, if we want to be at the beach, we have to be by a lake or something. But I know that God will like guide us if we're supposed to go. But I think it's fun right now. I told him in the next 5 years, I really want to continue to visit. Like we went to Tennessee last year, and like just going to these different places. His sister just moved to Montana, like going and visiting different areas. And I really do think God will put on our heart, like if or when we find a place, it's like, this could be a place we could go.
Yeah,
but
I'd say God, or if this state gets any weirder. Because don't get me wrong, like California as a geographical location, it's amazing, but for some reason it just seems to like want to, yeah.
And then there's me who's like, it's gonna be changed. There's a revival coming, because I'm just crazy like that. So we will see.
And I hope you're right. I really do hope you're right. But at the same time, it's just like the thing that makes me want to move out of state sometimes is just like stuff like that, where it's like we have 3 little girls at home, and I don't want it to be any crazier than it is for them. And
just protecting them, for sure.
Definitely. So whether or not we will, I mean, I think right now the way things are with my career, and I'm not saying I'm like a career-driven, career comes first. That's not it. It just wouldn't work.
Well, and our community, our micro life we shared with you guys.
That's the other half. Is that what we have here as far as community and fellowship with, with church, with school, with our kids. It's wonderful, and it's the best it's ever been. And then, like I said, but going back to like work, like I have a career where I can definitely live out of state and still do it. It would just be very tough, especially with little kids and.
And I salute the families who've done it. And amazing. But I know there are some families like it was kind of easier because we weren't really plugged into the church. We were leaving school already. So it was kind of like, let's start this fresh start. With us, it's like we have a community at church. We have a community with school to where it would be a big move. But babe, thank you so much for being so honest. Not even today, but through every single episode, I feel like you've come and just been willing to chat. And you guys, if you know my husband, to me, it's a treat because I get to hear him chat and connect all the time. But, some people are like, your husband doesn't talk a lot. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he does. So it's just a treat that you were able to come on here. But I love you so much, and I appreciate you and your time.
I love and appreciate you, too. And thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah. So tune in for next week. Love you guys.